My name is Catherine Miller. I am 43 years old, living with my husband David and my mother-in-law Eleanor in a 3-bedroom house in the northern suburbs of Atlanta. The area is fairly quiet, about a 30-minute drive from downtown, convenient for commuting but still private enough. I could have enjoyed this peaceful life if things hadn't slowly veered off course. I met David through a mutual friend at a small party in Nashville. He had been divorced for a year and was raising his son, Lucas, on his own. David is 7 years older than me, a former mid-level manager at a construction firm, and he had that grounded, steady energy that made me feel safe. We were together for 2 years before getting married. When I told him I couldn't have children due to complications from an ovarian surgery I'd had when I was younger, he just held me close and said, "I didn't marry you to have kids. I married you because I want you by my side." I believed those words like they were a vow that would never change. After we got married, David suggested we move in with his mother so we could support each other. Lucas was 9 at the time, and I was still working full-time at a downtown pharmacy. Eleanor, my mother-in-law, was an elegant woman, always well-dressed, soft-spoken. The first day I met her, she smiled gently and said, "If you love David, then I'll love you." That one sentence made me believe I could belong in this family. We moved in, and to balance work and home, I switched from full-time to part-time. David said he would handle all the household expenses and I only needed to help around the house and take time for myself. I felt a little sad leaving behind a stable job, but I thought it was a necessary sacrifice for a happy marriage. At first things went smoothly. I cleaned, made dinner, and Eleanor handled school drop-offs and pickups for Lucas. But I quickly noticed that I was usually the only one at the dinner table. David came home late. Eleanor and Lucas ate early and went to their rooms. Gradually, I started to feel like a stranger in the home I was working so hard to care for. Lucas barely spoke to me, even though I always asked how his day went, baked treats for him after school, or tried to join him in watching sports. He kept his distance. He wouldn't even look me in the eye. I thought maybe it was just a phase, but later I realized someone had been planting bitter thoughts in his mind. One afternoon I overheard Eleanor whispering to Lucas in the kitchen, thinking I had left the house. "Just remember, sweetheart, no one can ever replace your real mother. Don't let anyone make you forget that." I froze. My heart clenched. I never wanted to replace anyone. I just wanted to be accepted as part of the family. But to her, I was always on the outside. I didn't say anything. I just gave a strained smile, washed another plate, and quietly went upstairs, trying to forget the words that had cut so deep. The days that followed grew heavier. Eleanor began to interfere in everything I did, from how I folded towels to how I seasoned soup. Always with a sweet tone but sharp implications. "A woman your age should know how to keep a kitchen warm, Catherine. Not everyone gets the chance to care for a family like this." I knew what she meant. I couldn't have children, and in her eyes that meant I didn't measure up to being a real mother. I tried to be patient, hoping things would improve with time, but I was wrong. The cracks kept widening, creeping into every corner of my life, and I could feel a storm building. Lucas moved out the day after his high school graduation, just as he turned 18. No farewell dinner, no thank you for the meals I'd made for him over the past 8 years, just a scribbled note on the kitchen table. "I'm moving in with a friend. Don't come looking for me." I stared at the rushed handwriting, fingers trembling, but not a single tear fell. Maybe because I'd already cried them all, just never where anyone could see. After Lucas left, everything in the house shifted. Eleanor stopped cooking, stopped gardening, didn't even clean her own room anymore. Every chore, from laundry to scrubbing toilets, landed on me. And she became even more nitpicky. "Catherine, what did you use to mop the floor? It's so sticky. Never seen it like this before. Why are you hanging laundry here? Letting the sun hit the front of the house like that? What will the neighbors think?" I used to smile and brush it off, thinking that patience might soften her, but I misjudged. Patience only made her push further. One evening I made lasagna, David's favorite, and left a portion for him in the oven. Just as I was about to bring it out, Eleanor blocked the kitchen door. "Who do you think you are cooking that? Do you know how amazing David's first mother-in-law's lasagna was? Lucas once told me yours made him want to skip dinner." I stood frozen, fingers tightening around the hot tray. Comments like that became more frequent. And I started to feel invisible in my own home. David kept going to work as usual. He still hugged me before leaving and texted, "Heading home soon," every afternoon. But it started feeling like habit, not affection. He never asked how his mother was treating me, never noticed I'd become a full-time maid without pay. One night I came home early, hoping for a quiet dinner with David. But when I stepped in, Eleanor was already seated at the table, planner in hand, voice commanding. "Saturday, you need to wake up earlier. I've scheduled a full closet and garage cleaning, and wipe down Lucas's windows. They're disgustingly dusty." I forced a smile, said nothing. But as I turned away, I heard her mutter, just loud enough, "No kids, no real job, nothing special. I still don't understand why David married someone like that." For the first time, I stopped walking. Not because I hadn't heard hints of this before, but because this time I felt something break inside, like the final stone added to a bridge already under too much weight. I took a deep breath, didn't look back, and walked upstairs as if trying to hold on to the last shred of dignity I had left. I started writing down every task Eleanor gave me, every dish, every chore. The more I wrote, the clearer it became. I was a guest in what I once believed was my home. At night I lay in bed listening to the laughter of David and his mother downstairs. The living room I hadn't been invited into for over a year. One night when David was asleep, I opened his desk drawer. Inside was a financial report. All the utility bills, internet, and household expenses for the past 6 months had been paid through my account. My name was listed on every auto payment. I had agreed to help with some costs, but no one ever asked me if I was okay with this. My heart sank. I closed the drawer and stepped out onto the balcony. The Georgia night was cool, stars scattered across the sky. But inside I felt hollow. Somewhere far off, cars passed along the freeway, steady and indifferent, like a city that didn't care about broken dreams. I stood there for a long time and asked myself, why am I still here? No one needed me. No one asked if I was okay. And the most painful truth? Maybe they really did think I was unnecessary. I had just set down a bag of groceries in the kitchen when I heard Eleanor's voice chirping from the living room, bright, joyful, as if she'd just received the greatest gift in the world. "This is wonderful, finally a grandchild, thank you, Lucas." I froze, hands still resting on the bunch of greens. I stared at the wall in front of me, trying to understand what I'd just heard. Lucas had a child? 1 minute later, David walked into the kitchen, phone in hand, face blank. He avoided eye contact, and I knew exactly what that meant. He already knew. And he had no intention of being the one to tell me. I quietly stepped into the living room. Eleanor was sitting in the armchair, her eyes sparkling like a child on Christmas Eve, the phone beside her displaying an ultrasound image. "Lucas and his wife are moving back here next month to have the baby," she announced, not even glancing at me. "Sarah doesn't have any family nearby, and Lucas wants his child to grow up surrounded by family." "What about me?" I asked, my voice soft but clear. "I live here, this is my home." "It's not your home," she replied, her tone cold as ice. "You're just David's wife, and we don't need another woman in this house making a mess of things. We're finally going to have a real family, a child, something you could never give us." Each word tore into me like shards of glass. I had braced myself for cold stares, for snide remarks, but nothing could have prepared me for being pushed out of my own home, simply because I couldn't become a mother. "What are you saying?" I asked, my voice cracking but still composed. "That I have to leave because Sarah's pregnant?" Eleanor crossed her arms, lifted her chin like she was delivering a verdict. "Exactly. We need space for Lucas and his wife. I'll be redoing his old bedroom, and you should be mature enough to step aside. Don't cling to something that was never really yours." I looked at David. He still stood there, fingers tightening around his phone, eyes turned away. The silence was crushing, and in that moment I realized I was completely alone. "David?" I called his name, clinging to one last strand of hope. He didn't answer, just gave a helpless shrug. That, more than anything, was the cruelest response. I turned and walked to the bedroom, each step heavier than the last, as if even the floor had turned against me. I didn't know how long I sat on the edge of the bed, my heart hollow, my mind spinning. 8 years I had been here. 8 years of meals, folded towels, carefully arranged flowers in the living room. And now, one ultrasound photo was enough to erase me like I'd never existed. I used to believe that even if I couldn't bear children, I could still build a family. With love, with patience. But to them, love had no value unless it came with blood. That night, I didn't sleep. I listened as Eleanor called relatives, bragging that she was finally going to be a real grandma. Every time she said real, it felt like a vice squeezing my chest. And me? What was I? Just a placeholder until the real story began? I stepped out onto the balcony. The night wind brushed my cheek, but it wasn't as cold as her words when I passed her room the next morning. Good thing you never left anything of value here. Won't be missed when you go. I didn't reply. I had no words left, but deep inside, something stirred. Not sadness. Awakening. I left the house that Saturday morning, exactly 3 days after Eleanor's verbal sentence. It was still dark, mist curling over the street, but my mind had never been clearer. I didn't cry, didn't shake, didn't look back. I just picked up my phone, called a moving company, and scheduled a pickup for that afternoon. Eleanor's words kept replaying in my head like a broken record. Won't be missed when you go. Fine, then I'd go. I started packing everything that belonged to me. The armchair in the office, the silverware I bought for our first Christmas here, the bedding I picked to match my favorite colors. One item at a time, I boxed up each faded memory. David wasn't home. He said he was out of town for work, but took no luggage. That alone raised more than one question. In the afternoon, the movers arrived. I handed them a list of items to take. They worked quickly, didn't ask questions. I just stood by, clutching my folder of personal documents, feeling empty. When the last box was loaded, I turned to look at the house one final time. Everything I had tried to build here was now just space. Eleanor stood frozen in the hallway, shock on her face. You're taking everything? I nodded lightly. Just what I bought. I figured you'd appreciate the extra room for Lucas and Sarah. She opened her mouth to speak, but I didn't wait. I placed the house keys on the kitchen counter, walked out the door, and didn't look back. A strange sense of relief washed over me. That evening, I stopped at a small bar near the temporary apartment I'd rented. It was the same place David and I used to frequent in our early days, though we hadn't been there in over 4 years. I sat at the bar, ordered a cold apple juice, and waited. I didn't know why I came. Just a feeling I couldn't shake. A young waitress approached, her eyes narrowing as she studied me. You're Catherine, right? David's wife? I nodded, a bit surprised. I remember seeing you two here before. Lately he's been coming in a lot, but not alone. I kept a calm expression, but my fingers tightened around the glass, icy and trembling. The waitress leaned in slightly, her voice lower. The woman he's been with, she's a little older than me. Tall, dark blonde hair. I think she works in insurance or something. I nodded in thanks, pulled out my phone. No need for further explanations. The puzzle pieces were falling into place. That night, I started digging. Credit card statements, GPS logs, every business trip with no emails from his company. I created a new folder on my computer and named it The Truth. 3 days later, I had what I needed. Screenshots of hotel transactions, messages with an unsaved number, and even surveillance images from the bar of David walking in with the mystery woman, sent by the same waitress. Looking at it all, I didn't feel heartbroken anymore. I felt something stronger, like a wave crashing after years of being still. It wasn't just betrayal that fueled me. It was the realization that I had let others sideline me in my own life. I sent David a one-line email. We need to talk. Meet me at the house Thursday night. Alone. That Thursday night I sat in my temporary apartment, heart steady like the ocean before a storm. I wasn't afraid anymore. I'd spent enough time living for others. Now, I was ready to reclaim my voice. If this was the game they thought I'd quietly bow out of, they were dead wrong. I arrived at the old house at 7 p.m. sharp. The place I once called home now felt unfamiliar, colder than ever. The porch light cast a pale glow on the pavement, and chatter echoed from inside. I knocked 3 times, then pushed the door open. No one stood up to greet me. David sat on the sofa, beside him Lucas and Sarah. The daughter-in-law Eleanor had always dreamed of. Eleanor herself sat neatly in her usual chair, her eyes already brimming with disdain. I walked straight into the middle of the room, no greetings, no preamble. We need to clear a few things up. No one said a word. Only the ceiling fan creaked, ticking away the tension. I pulled out a stack of documents and placed them on the glass table. Their eyes followed the motion, uncertainty flickering. These are all the rent, utilities, internet, and maintenance bills from the past 12 months. Every single one is in my name, and let me remind you, the rent on this house is $4,200 a month. The person paying that wasn't David. It was me. David flinched, Sarah's jaw dropped, and Eleanor squinted like, trying to process what I just said. "You've got to be kidding," Lucas said first, half laughing, half annoyed. I turned to him, meeting his gaze. "No, I'm not. I'm a licensed pharmacist, working for a premium chain. My income more than covers this house, especially since David's been earning only a third of his former salary for the past 3 years." David opened his mouth, likely to protest, but I cut in. "No need to deny it. I have last month's pay stub, and if necessary I'll show tax records too." The room fell silent. Eleanor stood abruptly. "So what? Money is shared. David is your husband." I looked at her, calm but firm. "The joint account? That's me transferring money in every month. David sends his share to you." Sarah glanced nervously at Lucas, whispering something, but I didn't care. I turned to Lucas. "You and your wife are expecting a child. I'm not standing in your way, but if you plan on living here from now on, you two will cover rent. All of it. That includes utilities. I'm done being your financial sponsor." Lucas went pale. "We thought it was going to be free. Mom said the house was being passed down to us." I laughed, not with pain anymore, but with bitter clarity. "Nothing's being passed down. This is a rental, not owned. And the lease? It's in my name, not David's, not Eleanor's, certainly not yours." David froze. He knew I was right. The lease had been signed under my name to meet the credit requirements, something he had asked me to do to avoid legal complications. I pulled out a copy of the lease and placed it beside the stack of bills. "I'll be withdrawing from the lease at the end of this month. The landlord has already been informed. Anyone who wants to stay can work directly with them, and be prepared to pay at least $4,200 a month." Eleanor said nothing. She sank into the chair, her eyes no longer proud. I glanced at Sarah. She was holding Lucas's hand, but her face was tense. "If that's too much, maybe look into something more affordable. A 2-bedroom apartment on the north side of the city runs about $1,200 a month." David stared at the floor. I knew he was ashamed, but there was no reason for me to protect the truth anymore. I slowly stood, slung my bag over my shoulder. "I came here to set the record straight. I've done that. Any further communication can go through my attorney." I turned and walked toward the door. No one stopped me. No one called my name. Only silence followed behind me, and the cold early spring wind sweeping across the porch, like it was washing away all the years I had spent living for someone else. I had just reached the door when Sarah suddenly spoke, her voice shaky. "You said you're leaving the lease. What about David?" I turned around, locking eyes with David, who hadn't said a word all evening. He sat there, shoulders slightly hunched, like he was bracing for a storm. I smiled, a faint icy smile. "I think David will be just fine. He still has Mary." The room went dead silent, like someone had unplugged all sound. Sarah whipped her head toward David, her face going pale. "Mary? Who's Mary?" David opened his mouth, but nothing came out. His hand trembled slightly before rising to rub his forehead, as if hoping the moment would vanish if no one spoke of it. I set my bag down, pulled out my phone, and opened a photo. David grinning ear to ear at a cafe, sitting across from a woman with dark blonde hair, their hands touching over the table like no one else existed. I placed the phone on the table, letting the image speak. "This is Mary, David's coworker, the one he's been traveling for work with these past 3 months." Sarah stammered. "No way, Mom, did you know about this?" Eleanor stood frozen, then slowly shook her head, her face gone ghostly pale. I looked at David, truly bewildered for the first time, but I gave him no room to speak. "I don't care who knew. I said it because this is where it ends. I don't want an apology. I don't want pity. I just want clarity." David stood but didn't approach. He only nodded quietly. "I'll sign the divorce papers." I nodded, there was nothing more to say. Sarah collapsed into the chair, covering her face with her hands, her muffled sobs filling the thick silence. Eleanor stood like a statue, no longer the commanding woman who once ruled the house, with her chin held high. I walked out the door, this time for real. No one walked me out. No one called me back. The door closed behind me like the final page of a chapter I had tried to preserve far too long, even after I had nothing left to give. 3 weeks later, I moved into a small apartment on the west side of the city, just 1 bedroom and a balcony overlooking a quiet little river, but enough to feel like I was finally starting over, this time for me. I returned to working full-time at the pharmacy, and I also took on a side project training new pharmacists. The days were long but fulfilling, because now everything I did was for myself. I began sorting out all the legal documents. The divorce papers were signed and filed less than 2 weeks after that confrontation. David didn't contest anything. Maybe he knew. It had been over for a long time. No one had just had the courage to cut the cord. I got rid of all the decorations I had once picked carefully to please my mother-in-law. I bought myself a new rug, lavender, my favorite color, the same one Eleanor used to call too dreamy. I started planting. A few pots of mint and lavender lined the balcony. Every morning I made coffee, sat under the early sunlight, listened to the gentle hum of cars on the street below, and felt my heart getting lighter. One day I received a handwritten letter, no return address, but the handwriting was familiar. It was from Lucas. Catherine, I'm sorry for not understanding you. When I was younger, I always thought you were trying to replace my mom, but the truth is, you were just trying to be the adult in a family that never truly welcomed you. I remember all those times you showed up to cheer me on at my games. I never said thank you, but I noticed. I hope you're doing well. I'll try to be a better father than the ones I grew up watching. Lucas? I set the letter down, overwhelmed by a feeling I couldn't quite describe. Not because I wanted to go back, but because I realized that sometimes walking away is the only way to give something good the space to grow. I smiled faintly. That story had closed. And finally, I had chosen to live for myself. One Friday afternoon, just after finishing my shift at the pharmacy, the receptionist called me over with a small, carefully wrapped package. I was surprised. I hadn't ordered anything recently. The handwriting in the top left corner was strangely familiar. When I got home, I opened the package to find a handwritten letter and an old photo. Lucas and me at his high school graduation, with me adjusting his tie while he blushed. I sat on the sofa and unfolded the letter. The paper smelled like fresh ink. The handwriting was stronger than before, but it was still Lucas. Now a husband. And soon, a father. Catherine, you may not want to read this, but I still need to write it. There's something I've owed you for a long time. I'm sorry. When I was a kid, I thought you came to ruin what felt familiar. I was influenced too much by Grandma's whispers. That you were trying to take Dad away to replace my mom. I believed it so deeply that I chose to be cold and distant instead of getting to know who you really were. But now, with Sarah pregnant and me about to become a father, I'm beginning to understand. Not everyone who gives you life teaches you how to live with kindness. And not everyone who didn't give you life is a stranger. I remember the times you'd sneak cookies into my backpack when I skipped breakfast. I remember how you always saved me the best piece of barbecue even though you were the one who cooked it and never took any for yourself. I remember you sitting with me for hours, helping me with math I absolutely hated. Grandma always said you were fake, but now I know, no one fake could have been that patient for so many years. When you left, I thought I'd won. But a few weeks later my mom told me you were the one who paid the rent all those years. I was stunned, not because of the money, but because I never realized just how quietly you sacrificed. I hope you can forgive me, not because I deserve it, but because I don't want to carry this guilt forever. I hope that one day when my child grows up, I can teach them to be thankful for good people, even if those people don't share our blood. I know you've started over. I sincerely hope you're happy, Catherine. Lucas. I sat there for a long time after reading it. A wave of emotion rose in my chest. Not weakness, but the release of something I thought I'd never feel. Recognition. Lucas wasn't that cold boy anymore. He had grown up. And finally, he saw all the little things I'd quietly done for him, not to be repaid, but because I had genuinely wanted to be part of that family. But the most powerful part wasn't the apology. It was the fact that I no longer lived inside that apology. I didn't write back. I believed Lucas didn't need a reply to know I had forgiven him, because once I too needed that kind of forgiveness. From myself. Since leaving that house, I've learned how to live by my own rhythm. I eat breakfast slowly, read books every night before bed. I've started writing down my experiences, not to dwell on the pain, but to remind myself. I made it through. I rose up from a life that once threatened to drown me. I used to think happiness meant a house full of laughter, a complete family, a perfect ending. But now I understand. Sometimes, happiness is simply no longer needing to prove your worth to anyone. It's breathing deeply, without wearing labels that were never meant for you. One afternoon, as sunlight poured over the balcony, I looked at the blooming lavender pots and smiled. Life isn't perfect, but it's mine. And after all the loss, betrayal, and awakening, I've finally found myself again. Catherine's story is a powerful reminder that misplaced sacrifice often leads to being taken for granted. No matter how kind or patient she was, it wasn't until she stood up and walked away that she was finally seen. In real life, many people find themselves stuck in toxic families or relationships. Sometimes, choosing to walk away isn't selfish. It's the first step to reclaiming your worth, peace, and the life you truly deserve. What do you think about Catherine's choice? Would you have done the same if you were in her shoes? Share your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to follow the channel for more powerful and emotional family stories.